The recording. Okay, we'll start
now. We're recording. Yes,
All
please.
right. Hi everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I am Daita Serghi. I am Senior Education Manager with AASHE, the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. And in 2010, I graduated from Columbia University with a PhD from the Biological Sciences Department. So I'm originally from Romania. I grew up there. I was born during the communism, and I was 12 in '89 when all the changes in Europe took place. I went to a high school that where everything was taught in German, so I'm also fluent in German. I went to high school and then to college at the University of Bucharest. I went to the biochemistry and molecular biology department of the College for Biology at the University of Bucharest. And then I came for my PhD at Columbia University right after college and started in 2000. And as it happens for sciences, PhDs are long. So I finished all my lab work by 2009, moved away from New York and came back to defend my thesis in 2010. And it was actually 2 days after the whole graduation ceremony. So I came back in 2011 to actually walk and have my robe and everything. So it was a long, long journey to get my PhD. And I will stop here and hear your next question.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so if you could tell us about your current position. So both maybe the big picture projects that you work on, as well as the more day-to-day minutia of kind of what your job entails.
Yeah, so I started at this organization in 2014. And I was hired initially as a programs coordinator. So then I was promoted to programs manager, and now I'm the senior education manager. And it's a small organization. So nonprofits oftentimes are pretty small. We're a 15 people organization, and I'm the only one who does what I do. I also have an intern, but basically it's me running all the education programs, and I'm a manager not because I manage people, it's because I manage programs. And so in this role, I'm overseeing all of our educational programs, professional development, professional learning. We have a webinar program, we have workshops, which used to be in person and now they're all online. And actually the program has grown a lot since 2020. We have a lot more events and different kind of educational opportunities. We also have an annual conference. So for that, we have a call for proposal process, deciding the sessions, the speakers, putting together the whole schedule and the content and everything that will happen at the conference. So I'm overseeing that whole process to get from the call for proposals to actually having sessions at the conference. And we also have a few other programs like a mentorship program, and a few other smaller programs that I also oversee. So that's big picture. I basically manage all of our education programs. The day-to-day is different depending on the time of the year and what is going on at that time. Our annual conference is in October. We usually start the call for proposals sometimes in the spring. So that has its own pace and deadlines and things that have to happen at a specific time so that the conference actually has a schedule and sessions and presenters. But the webinars, for example, are every other week. So throughout the year, I engage with webinar presenters, and every time it's a different set of presenters. So I do a lot of things on Zoom, also as the moderator and organizer of those webinars. I don't put the content out. I just help the community come together, share knowledge, create relationships, and so on. So that's our webinars. But I'm most excited for our workshops and what we now call virtual education programs. Our community is actually a global community. So we have members in the US and outside of the US. So embracing virtual education has enabled us to reach a lot more people and also bring them together in spaces that they otherwise would not be together. And that's what I love the most of my work, is this kind of bringing people together to share knowledge, learn from one another, support one another, create community, create relationships. So that's where I love the most of what I do.
Thank you. And maybe if you could give us an overview of what AASHE is and does too.
Yeah, so it's a nonprofit organization, and our members are actually institutions, not people. So the members are higher education institutions, so universities can become members in AASHE, and anyone with an email address at that institution then receives member benefits. So Columbia is an AASHE member, so you are automatically AASHE members, so you can get resources from us as members. So what do we, so our members are universities, but how do we support them? It's on their sustainability journey. So that is both on the operation side. So as you know, campuses consume energy, consume water, produce waste, consume food, have transportation departments, and so on. So everything that has to do with sustainability in the operations, but also on the academic side, how and what do we teach the students, given the times we're living in, and also on the campus engagement side. So how does the university engage with students, with faculty, with staff, with others coming into the campus, and also publicly with the communities around them? Are they good stewards of resources and good neighbors? And are also very important DEI and RESJ aspects in those relationships. There is also an intersection of sustainability and social justice. So there's a lot of that conversation also that we are elevating in the community. And our main programs is the conference, the education programs, and then we have something called STARS, which is a sustainability tracking and rating system for universities. So they can, the first time they go through that process is figuring out a baseline of where you are with your operations, with your academics, with your engagement, with your policies and everything. And then repeating that every 2-3 years, you get a rating, and it's bronze, silver, gold, or platinum. And then you can also compare with peers or others in how well you're doing in different categories, and keep building up your sustainability, institutional sustainability.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. It's interesting to know that Columbia is a member. That's great.
Yes.
So now going back to the beginning of your career, how did you land that first job after your PhD? What was that? And what was that position? And how did you find that position?
Yeah. So I'm putting a few links in the chat. So
yes, thank you.
And also my LinkedIn, so you have all of this information while I am talking about this. But I mentioned that I finished my lab work in 2009 and then left New York City Actually, I got married that year, and my husband and I decided that it's time to move. We both were finishing our programs. He had done he's a physician, so he finished his residency, and I finished my PhD. So we sort of put the finger on the map and decided to move to Hawaii because why not? So we moved to Hawaii. He got a position there, his first doctor position, post residency, and I was still writing my thesis. So I wasn't looking for work right away. And I was also a little bit exploring and soul searching what I wanted to do after PhD, because I had realized during my last years that going into academia was not what I wanted to do. Going into a postdoc was not necessarily where my passion was anymore. So I focused on writing my thesis and also looking what opportunities are there in Hawaii. We also moved right at the crash in 2009, and the University of Hawaii system is a state university, so budgets were slashed. There was a furlough for new hires, so it wasn't great timing to work in a university setting, but they still needed people to teach. So my very first job after PhD was actually a teaching position at one of the community colleges. So we moved there in August, and this was a position that was posted late in the fall for to start in January. Um, and I think I was the only applicant in the end, because usually people don't apply for spring semester. They usually try to find teaching positions to start at the beginning of the school year. And I think they had some unexpected changes with whoever was the faculty before. So I went there. They basically gave me a book and said, here is the book, go and teach. And my PhD was in molecular biology, and this was a class on environment and ecology. So if you know anything about biology, it's basically the other end of biology. So I was like, okay, I will teach. So I did have a tiny bit of teaching experience and a lot of enthusiasm. I actually love teaching. And when I was at Columbia, I did do some trainings at, you'll have to remind me what the name was of that center.
Center
The
for Teaching and Learning.
Center for Teaching Excellence. I think it was CTE,
Uh,
maybe.
maybe they switched. They changed now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I did, I mean, at Columbia as a PhD student, I did have to TA 3 semesters or something like that. But in biological sciences, when I was there, when you were TAing, you weren't actually teaching. You were grading or you were helping in the labs. There wasn't actually, lecturing or teaching or being with the students. So I did some of those workshops at the Center for Teaching at Columbia, but I wanted to teach more. So I went and got this job, and I had a personal interest in sustainability, so I tried to also instill some of that. They gave me the book and the slides of the previous professor, and they seemed very outdated to me. So they were paying me something like, I don't know, $3,000 a semester or something. It was like ridiculous, no money. So I was like, okay, I might as well do whatever I want since I have no commitment here or anything like that. So I redid everything with a sustainability lens, and I really embraced that since that's what I had as my professional opportunity, and it was actually a really good experience. I taught a couple of other classes. I actually ended up also teaching at the main campus molecular biology and cell biology class, so that was also fun. And being at the university, I also met some other people who were interested in sustainability. There was a local nonprofit, the Sustainability Association for Hawaii, so I got involved with that. And I met all kinds of interesting people in that process, and eventually moved to uh, being hired to do some sustainability coordination work for the entire University of Hawaii system. So this again was not an actual position. They did not have a budget line. It did not exist in the chart of the university, but there was a grassroots initiative on getting more sustainability more institutionalized. So we sort of created this position that I was paid hourly from one of the vice president's budgets, but with the title of sustainability coordinator for the system. And we worked with all 10 campuses and had an initiative to change the policy of the university to incorporate a sustainability commitment for the entire system. We took it to the Board of Regents. We had students who backed that. And when the students come in and say, this is what we want, the Board of Regents can't say no most of the time. So we had success, and then the president of the university officially signed that commitment, and was referring to me as the sustainability coordinator of the University of Hawaii system without actually having the official role in the university chart. But then this is how they created the position. So that was an interesting experience that sort of happened to happen to me without me necessarily seeking it, but it was really, really great. And I used actually a lot of what I had learned in my PhD in being able to be there and own that space. Um, and from there, this position at the AASHE opened up, and they were looking for somebody who had both coordinator experience and teaching experience. And that's not something that's often found, because faculty teach, they don't necessarily do this kind of more administrative and staff work, and staff don't teach. So it was perfect fit for me. And it's a virtual organization, so we work from home. So I was hired while I was in Hawaii, and I worked from home in Hawaii, and it was pretty fun because most of my colleagues were on the East Coast. So I would wake up and it was lunchtime for them, so we would meet or whatever, work together until my lunchtime. Then they would go, their day was done, and I had the afternoon all on my own to be creative and do work. So it was a really I really liked the flexibility of doing work online. So this started in 2014, and I've worked virtually since then. Although now I no longer live in Hawaii, I moved to Fairfax, Virginia, close to Washington, D.C. for family reasons, because this is where my sister is, and Hawaii was pretty far from family. Uh, and I had a couple more kids, so it was made sense to be close to my sister. And I think I told you about my entire trajectory.
That's great. Yeah, thank you, because that was going to be the next question. I guess I'm curious too, because I'm looking back at your bio, Daita, and I see you're a lead green associate and also a sustainability excellence professional. So I'm just curious about those certifications and where that came into your career path.
Yeah, and maybe I'll step back a little bit and talk also a little bit about my time at Columbia. And I mentioned that towards the end of my PhD, I was realizing that uh, academia and research was not where I was gonna go. But figuring out what I was gonna do was not necessarily a straight answer. Um, so while I was at Columbia, I actually tried to take advantage of everything that well, as much as possible that was available to me as a student there. So I took, because we could take extra classes for free as students there. I think one class a semester or something like that. Um, I took a class in HTML programming in the computer science department. And then I took a class in the, actually in the MBA program in the business school. I took another class. And I got involved with the student enterprises, which now I think they no longer exist, but I will put a link in the chat because I found this on LinkedIn. So there is still a LinkedIn profile for the Columbia University Tutoring and Translating Agency, which no longer exists. But when I was there, this was an active student organization. So it was run by students and it was hiring students and it was offering language services, so translations, transcribing, and tutoring to clients outside of Columbia. So I first started with them because I'm fluent in Romanian and German, so as a translator. And then every year they were hiring new managers from the student body. So I actually was the manager 2 years in a row while doing my PhD and while also having an infant and toddler. Because I did have my first daughter while I was a student in the PhD program. She was born in 2002, so 2 years after I started my program. Um, and it was very different to what I was doing as a PhD student in biological sciences. This kind of work was very, very different from that. But it was something that I wanted to do more of because I also realized that while my PhD is awesome and I came with a lot of passion, this was not the path I was going to go into. So I was doing the workshops at the Center for Teaching Excellence, and I was doing these extra classes, and I did the managing of the tutoring and translating services. And actually, my boss did not know that for 2 years I was also doing this other thing, because I don't think that he would have liked to know that I was spending time on other endeavors. But I was also doing my work in the lab. It was not affected by this additional stuff. And I was also making some extra money because my only income was my Columbia stipend, which I don't know how much it is nowadays, but it was not a lot. And supporting a young child at the same time. Um, so I did a lot of stuff on the side, and I also got interested in consulting work, probably from going into the business school and the MBA program and taking some classes there and meeting some students there. I learned more about the consulting work, and at that time there was so this idea was sort of new for PhDs and master students to go into consulting. It was, I think nowadays it's a little bit more I don't know, the norm, but at that time it was not. And the big consulting companies were just realizing the assets that they could have from hiring PhD students into consulting jobs. So a few of us that were at GSAS starting a new student club, the Graduate Student Consulting Club. No, the CCCG is the Columbia Consulting Club Graduate something. I don't know.
I think it's Columbia Graduate Consulting
Consulting Club.
Club.
Okay,
Yeah.
CGCC. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we started that. So I was a co-founder of that a long time ago. And actually, had a couple of interviews, but life did not want me to go into that direction because I did pass a couple of rounds of interviews with two big consulting companies. Um, Granted, I wanted to go back to Romania or Eastern Europe, so it was 4 positions over there. And one of them told me I'm overqualified and they don't know what to do with me. And the other one, my interviewer changed, and this was the last round, and the person who was supposed to interview me could not make it, and the person who ended up interviewing me said, I don't believe in PhDs going into consulting, so you will not pass this round. So that was a big slap in my face and in my plans for where I was going after Columbia, because that was sort of my alternative pathway. Um, and that door closed and I didn't really know what to do. And then I met my now husband 2 months later. So, life did not want me to go back to Eastern Europe or Romania uh, or take a consulting job, but rather meet my husband and move to Hawaii and go into nonprofit work. So I will just say that it gets confusing at times and sometimes very stress inducing of where to go, especially if you don't have a very clear path, or even when you have a clear path, life might not take you there. And every experience and opportunity that I had at Columbia actually, I think, helped me get to where I am today, because in my PhD program, I learned so much, and all these additional opportunities that I was seeking out also helped me get to where I am today. And I am actually really happy in how it turned out.
I think you bring up a great point, which is often best laid plans or what we think we're going to do often takes a right turn or a left turn. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you kind of covered the questions of like what made you choose your career path, thinking about, for me, it seems like work-life balance and just circumstance as well. And then the advice that you have for current PhD students nearing graduation, I would say, take advantage of everything at Columbia as you can.
Yes, absolutely. And I know that you might be consumed by your PhD work and your thesis and your research, and that's absolutely important. Like, this is why you're there. Um, and this is probably your passion. And at the same time, now it's the time to take advantage of everything that Columbia and New York City has to offer, because once you're done being a student, life will be a little bit different. Now you can explore a lot of these alternative options or other things to add to your tool set, and other skills that you might not have. Um, and for me, for example, public speaking was something that from when I was young, I had a problem with. And now I'm here talking freely with all of you, and I don't have any notes, and that is not something that came naturally to me, but through being in the PhD program. And of course, you have to present your work in many different ways and at many different time points, but then also taking those other classes and putting myself out there. With the consulting club also, we did a lot of case not case studies.
Case studies,
Yeah,
yeah, or
and learning and
casting.
presenting and
Mhm.
whatever, all. So it was things that were not necessarily natural to me, but I wanted to uh extend myself a little bit, and help with where I knew I wasn't so strong, but I would need it in a professional setting. And it really helped me also, be where I am now, where I am engaging with hundreds of people. When we're at the conference, we have, depending on the type of conference, but we have from 100 to 300 sessions with 2-3 times more presenters that I am involved with. This year at the conference, we went back in person, and I actually presented a 3-hour workshop, and I loved it, being there with, with the people in the room and the energy and all of that, which 10 years ago, 20 years ago would have been like, I would have refused to do that. I would have declined that opportunity. So I think that take advantage of everything that Columbia has to offer, and don't worry too much about, if your path is not very clear, or even if it is clear but it doesn't happen the way you were planning. Have the tools to be flexible, to be resilient, to adapt to that. And I know it's not easy necessarily. And the baby that I mentioned earlier is now graduating from undergrad, so from college this December, early in 3.5 semesters. She'll be a graduate in a week or so. And I am feeling for her and all the uncertainty and anxiety for what is coming. And I just keep telling her, you're so young, and things will fall into place. And even if they might not be where you will be in 5 years from now, in 10 years from now, but build that resilience and flexibility and adaptability and tool set, and every experience, take the positives out of that. And it who knows where it will take you.
Yeah. I think on that note, that is some great advice, and something I often talk to students about as well. So I think what I'll do now is I'm going to stop the recording, and we will open it up for questions. We'll stop.